chosen one. What if I told you that on the 14th of August, 2025, God is going to call your name, and you won't even hear it coming? What if the very prayers you've been whispering in the dark for 30, 40, 50 years are about to be answered in a way so sudden, so overwhelming, that it will leave you breathless? What if every rejection, every closed door, every night you cried yourself to sleep, wondering if you mattered, was actually God positioning you for this exact moment? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. Right now, as you hear my voice, there's a prophecy unfolding that was written in heaven's archives before your first heartbeat. The 14th of August, 2025 isn't just another date on your calendar, it's your divine appointment with destiny. And if you walk away from this message, you may miss the single doorway God has been preparing for you for decades. I know you've been waiting. I know you've felt forgotten. I know there are nights when you've stared at the ceiling wondering if God even remembers your address. You've watched others get their breakthrough while you're still sitting in the same chair, praying the same prayers, wondering if your season will ever come. But what if I told you that your season of silence is about to explode into your season of supernatural acceleration? Before I go deeper into this earth-shattering revelation, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating. You're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let the Holy Spirit lead your heart. But listen closely, the 14th of August, 2025 carries a frequency that will separate the prepared from the unprepared, the chosen from the comfortable, the awakened from the asleep. And here's the shocking truth that's going to shatter everything you thought you knew about your timeline. You didn't find this message by accident. This message found you. Because your name, yes, your name has been whispered in the courts of heaven for this exact moment. If something in your spirit stirs, even now, if your chest feels tight, if your hands are trembling, if something ancient is awakening in your bones, I want you to type 3 words in your heart or even in the comments. I am ready. Because what I'm about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about your calling, your timing, and your destiny. The countdown has already begun. Are you listening? Why do you think your prayers have been delayed for so long? Why has breakthrough felt like a foreign language your spirit forgot how to speak? Why does it feel like God gave everyone else the invitation to the feast, but somehow your name got lost in the mail? Listen to me, dear one. What I'm about to tell you will either shatter your faith in perfect timing or restore it completely. Because the 14th of August, 2025 isn't random. It's not another date that will come and go while you sit in the same chair, staring at the same walls, wondering when your season will finally arrive. You've lived through 8 decades of history unfolding. You watched Kennedy get shot. You saw man walk on the moon. You survived the Cold War, witnessed 9/11s, lived through COVID, watched presidents rise and fall like waves against the shore. You've seen recession after recession, war after war, crisis after crisis. Your hands have felt the weight of loss, burying parents, spouses, friends who promised they'd always be there. But here's what's going to rock you to your core. In all your decades of watching history unfold, you've never lived through a moment like the 14th of August, 2025. Because this isn't just another page in the history books. This is the day heaven has been holding in reserve specifically for you. You see, God doesn't just work in seasons. He works in appointed times. The Bible calls them kairos moments, divine appointments, when eternity crashes into time with such force that everything changes in a single breath. Look at Exodus 12:6. God didn't say sometime in spring, when it's convenient, when you feel ready. Number, he said. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight, specific, precise, non-negotiable. And that night, that exact night, the destroyer passed over, and an entire nation walked from slavery into freedom in less than 24 hours. Look at Acts 2:1. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Not the week of Pentecost, not around Pentecost. The day. And in that moment, tongues of fire fell, the Holy Spirit descended, and 120 fearful disciples became world changers who turned the Roman Empire upside down. God operates on divine calendars, not human convenience. And the 14th of August, 2025, has been circled in blood-red ink in heaven's appointment book since before you took your first breath. But I know what's happening in your chest right now. That familiar ache. That voice that's been your tormentor for years, whispering the same poisonous question. What if I've already missed my moment? What if I waited too long? What if God moved on without me? Stop, right there. Stop. That voice isn't wisdom, it's warfare. That thought isn't truth, it's terrorism against your destiny. Because the same God who promised Abraham a son at 100, who called Moses to leadership at 80, who used Anna the prophetess at 84 to recognize the Messiah, that same God doesn't operate on expiration dates. Moses spent 40 years thinking he was done. 40 years in the wilderness, tending sheep, convinced his destiny had died in the Egyptian desert. But God was preparing him for the Red Sea. David spent years hiding in caves, running from King Saul, wondering if that anointing oil Samuel poured over his head was just olive oil after all. But God was preparing him for the throne. Sarah laughed at God's promise because she was 90 years old. 90. But Genesis 21:6 says, Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. That wasn't the laughter of mockery. That was the laughter of a woman who discovered that God's promises don't come with age limits. Your age isn't your limitation, it's your qualification. Every year you've lived, every tear you've cried, every prayer you've whispered in the dark, it's all been preparing you for the 14th of August, 2025. But here's what's going to happen on that day that will leave you speechless. There will be a sign, a supernatural confirmation so undeniable, so personal, so specifically designed for you, that you'll know beyond any shadow of doubt that this message wasn't just another YouTube video you stumbled across. I'm not talking about generic blessings or coincidences you have to squint to see. I'm talking about heaven opening its vault and releasing something with your name engraved on it. Something that's been waiting in the spiritual realm for this exact moment. And when it happens, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember my voice telling you that your delay wasn't denial, it was divine strategy. You'll remember that every closed door was actually God protecting you from settling for less than His best. The clock is ticking, chosen one. Not the clock on your wall, the clock in heaven's throne room. And it's about to strike midnight on your season of waiting. Your breakthrough isn't coming someday. It's coming the 14th of August, 2025. But only if you're ready to receive it. Are you ready to discover what God has been protecting you from all these years, and why the 14th of August was worth the wait? Dear chosen one, let me tell you something that's going to shake you to your core. Your life isn't random. Those decades of struggle, those years of wondering why nothing made sense, those nights when you felt completely forgotten by God and man alike, none of it was wasted time. You've been living inside a biblical prophecy, and you didn't even know it. Think about Joseph for a moment. 17 years old, dreaming big dreams, telling everyone about his destiny. His own brothers threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery. Can you imagine the confusion? The betrayal? For 13 years, Joseph went from slave to prisoner, from prisoner to forgotten man. 13 years of wondering, God, what happened to those dreams you gave me? But here's what Joseph couldn't see from his prison cell. Every rejection was positioning, every betrayal was preparation, every closed door was God's way of saying, not yet, son. You're not ready for what I'm about to give you. And then one morning, everything changed. Pharaoh had a dream. In 24 hours, Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister, from forgotten to favored. from the bottom of Egypt to running the entire economy. Sound familiar? How many years have you been in your own prison of disappointment? How many decades have you felt stuck, passed over, forgotten while watching others get promoted, get healed, get their breakthrough? You think you've been wasting time. God says you've been in preparation. Now let me tell you about Esther. She was an orphan, raised by her cousin. No money, no connections, no reason to believe she'd ever amount to anything significant. But Mordecai looked at this ordinary girl and saw something extraordinary. He prepared her, positioned her, and when the moment came, when an entire nation needed saving, Esther was the only one qualified for the assignment. For such a time as this, Mordecai told her. Not for such a time as that. Not for such a time as someday. For such a time as this. Here's what's going to shock you. You are Esther in 2025. Every rejection you've faced, every door that slammed shut, every season where you felt invisible, it was all preparation for the 14th of August. God has been positioning you for such a time as this. But let me get personal with you for a moment. 37 years ago, I was sitting in a hospital room watching my father take his last breath. Stage 4 cancer had ravaged his body, and I was angry, furious. I had prayed, fasted, believed for healing. Nothing. I walked out of that hospital ready to quit ministry, quit faith, quit everything. I sat in my car for 3 hours, crying, screaming at God. Where were you? Why didn't you show up? What's the point of any of this? And then, in the silence that followed my rage, I heard a whisper. Not audible, but unmistakable. Son, you think this is the end of the story. This is the beginning of your authority. You'll comfort others with the comfort you're receiving right now. I didn't understand it then. But for the next 37 years, every time I've sat with someone in their darkest hour, every time I've spoken hope into despair, every time I've helped someone navigate loss, I've drawn from that hospital room moment. The worst day of my life became the foundation of my ministry. Your pain wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Think about this. You've survived 100% of your worst days. You've made it through every heartbreak, every financial crisis, every health scare, every loss that should have destroyed you. That's not luck, that's divine preservation. God kept you alive because He has an assignment with your name on it. Your life is a manuscript God's been writing in invisible ink, and on the 14th of August, He's going to hold it to the light. Every struggle you've endured has been building your character for a moment you can't even imagine yet. Every tear you've cried has been watering seeds of compassion that will bloom into ministry. Every scar you carry is a credential that qualifies you for assignments others simply can't handle. But here's what breaks my heart. So many of you are looking at your lives and seeing failure instead of preparation. You're seeing delays instead of divine timing. You're seeing rejection instead of redirection. Stop it. Stop agreeing with the voice that says you're too old, too broken, too late. That voice is a liar. God doesn't waste decades preparing someone just to shelf them at the finish line. Moses was 80 when he split the Red Sea. Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born. Sarah was 90 when she laughed at God's promise and then birthed it. Anna the prophetess was 84 when she finally saw the Messiah she'd been waiting for her entire life. Your age isn't your limitation, it's your qualification. Your experience isn't your baggage, it's your equipment. Your scars aren't your shame, they're your credentials. If you've been through years where the pieces didn't make sense, stay with me because in a few minutes, I'll tell you exactly how those pieces fit the prophecy. Because the 14th of August, 2025, isn't just another date. It's the day God stops writing in invisible ink and starts revealing what He's been crafting in your life all along. But first, you need to understand something that's going to change how you see every single thing that's happened to you. Dear chosen one, I need to speak to something that's been weighing heavy on your heart, something you've whispered in the dark corners of your bedroom when nobody else was listening, something that sits in your chest like a stone when you see how fast this world is spinning without you. You've buried more friends than you ever imagined you would, haven't you? You've stood at more gravesides, signed more sympathy cards, and felt more empty chairs at family dinners than your heart was ever meant to endure. Each funeral feels like another piece of your world disappearing, another voice silenced, another laugh you'll never hear again. And somewhere between the third memorial service this year and the fourth doctor's appointment this month, you started wondering, am I next? Did I waste my time? Did I miss my moment? But let me tell you something that's going to cut through that lie like a sword through darkness. Job 14:7 declares, "At least there is hope for a tree. If it is cut down, it will sprout again, and its new shoots will not fail." You are not a faded photograph collecting dust on a shelf. You are not a relic of a bygone era. You are a seed that's been under the soil, not buried, but planted. The enemy wants you to believe your season is over. He whispers in your ear every morning when your joints ache and your energy isn't what it used to be. He tells you the world has moved on without you, that technology has left you behind, that your voice doesn't matter anymore in a culture that worships youth and speed. But God sees something different when he looks at you. When everyone else sees wrinkles, he sees wisdom lines carved by decades of walking with him. When others see grey hair, he sees a crown of glory earned through battles fought and victories won. When the world sees your age as a limitation, heaven sees it as your greatest qualification. Moses was 80 years old when God called him to deliver an entire nation. 80. The world would have put him in a retirement home, but God put a staff in his hand and said, "Now we begin." Abraham was 75 when God promised him nations would come from his lineage. Sarah was 90 when she laughed at the impossible and then birthed it into reality. Why do you think God waits until your hair is silver and your steps are measured? Because he needs warriors who have been tested by fire. He needs generals who know that every breath is a gift. He needs voices that carry the authority of experience, the weight of survival, the power of having seen his faithfulness through decades of valleys and mountains. You think you're too old? The enemy convinced you that lie because he knows something about seasoned saints that terrifies him. You've stopped caring about what people think. You've stopped being impressed by the temporary. You've learned to see through the noise and hear God's voice above the chaos. But here's what breaks my heart about this generation of chosen ones. You've been conditioned to step aside, to make room for the younger crowd, to quietly fade into the background while others take the stage. Society has convinced you that your time has passed, that your dreams have expiration dates, that your calling comes with a retirement plan. That is a lie from the pit of hell. Anna the prophetess was 84 years old when she proclaimed the coming of the Messiah. 84. She had been widowed after only 7 years of marriage and spent the next 77 years in prayer and fasting. The world would have called her a lonely old woman, but God called her a prophet. She didn't miss her moment, she was the moment. Right now, some of you are sitting in houses that feel too quiet. The phone doesn't ring as often. Your children are busy with their own lives. Your grandchildren are glued to screens you don't understand. And in that silence, the enemy whispers, "You don't matter anymore. Your story is over. Your best chapters are behind you." But what if that silence isn't abandonment? What if it's preparation? What if God has been clearing your calendar, simplifying your life, reducing the noise so you can finally hear what he's been trying to tell you for decades? Psalm 92:14 promises, "They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green." Fresh and green. Not dried up, not forgotten, not finished. You are entering your most fruitful season, but the harvest doesn't look like what the world expects. The world measures value by productivity, by speed, by how much noise you can make. But heaven measures worth by depth, by wisdom, by the quiet authority that comes from having walked through fire and still choosing faith. You carry something the younger generation desperately needs, but doesn't know how to find the peace that comes from knowing God's character, not just his blessings. Every sleepless night you've endured taught you how to pray when prayer is the only option. Every financial struggle taught you that Jehovah Jireh provides when bank accounts fail. Every health scare taught you that your body is temporary but your spirit is eternal. Every loss taught you that nothing in this world can separate you from the love of Christ. You've been enrolled in the University of Suffering, and you've graduated with a PhD in faith. And now, when the world is falling apart, when families are fractured, when hope is harder to find than ever before, God is looking for professors, not students, teachers, not learners, generals, not recruits. But here's the urgency burning in my spirit right now. The 14th of August, 2025 is not just another date on your calendar. It's the moment when heaven stops whispering and starts thundering over your life. And if you continue believing the lie that your time has passed, you'll miss the greatest assignment God has ever prepared for you. The question that will determine everything is this: will you continue living like your story is ending, or will you finally understand that your greatest chapter is about to begin? You know what breaks my heart? It's watching God's chosen ones sit in their living rooms at 70, 80, 90 years old, convinced their best days are behind them, convinced that the dreams God planted in their hearts decades ago have somehow expired, convinced that the 14th of August, 2025 is just another Thursday on the calendar. But listen to me carefully, dear one. Throughout Scripture, throughout history, God has operated on a pattern so precise, so intentional, that when you see it, you'll never doubt His timing again. The pattern of preparation. First comes the preparation. Look at Noah, 120 years of building an ark while people mocked him. 120 years. Can you imagine the neighbors whispering, "Old Noah's lost his mind again, hammering away at that boat in his backyard"? But Genesis 6:19 says God told him exactly what was coming, exactly when to prepare. The preparation wasn't punishment, it was positioning. Moses spent 40 years in Pharaoh's palace learning to be a prince, then 40 years in the wilderness learning to be nobody, before God called him at 80 to become everything Israel needed. 80 years old. When the world would put him in a nursing home, God put a staff in his hand and said, "Now you're ready to part seas." Abraham waited 25 years between the promise and Isaac's birth. 25 years of staring at Sarah's barren womb, wondering if he'd heard God correctly. But Hebrews 6:15 tells us, after waiting patiently, Abraham received what was promised. Do you see the pattern? Preparation, waiting, then sudden, explosive fulfillment. The pattern of divine waiting. But here's where it cuts deep. Here's where your heart might be bleeding right now. The waiting season. The season when it feels like God went on vacation and forgot to leave a forwarding address. You've been in preparation mode for decades. You've been faithful through divorces that nearly destroyed you, through children who walked away, through financial struggles that kept you awake at 3 a.m. calculating pennies. And you've been asking the same question Job asked in chapter 19, verse 27. How long will you torment me and crush me with words? How long, God? How long do I have to carry this weight? How long do I have to pretend I'm fine when I'm falling apart? How long do I have to watch everyone else get their breakthrough while I'm still sitting in the same chair? But what if I told you that every tear you've cried has been collected in heaven's bottles? What if I told you that Psalm 56:8 says God keeps track of all your sorrows? That He's recorded every sleepless night, every whispered prayer, every moment you almost gave up, but didn't. The waiting wasn't waste. The waiting was incubation. The pattern of sudden fulfillment. Now here's where it gets supernatural. When God's timing aligns with His purpose, the breakthrough doesn't trickle, it floods. It doesn't whisper, it roars. It doesn't gradually improve your situation, it completely transforms your reality overnight. Look at the history of America itself. The 7th of December, 1941, Pearl Harbor. A date that seemed like devastation but awakened a sleeping giant. The 11th of September, 2001, tragedy that unified a nation in ways we'd never seen. These weren't random dates. These were appointed times when heaven said, now. Now everything changes. The Great Awakening of 1740 didn't slowly build over years. It exploded in a matter of weeks across the American colonies. The Welsh revival of 1904 began with one young woman's prayer and within months had transformed an entire nation. The Azusa Street revival of 1906 started in a tiny building in Los Angeles and within 3 years had spread to every continent on Earth. Notice how every turning point had a date circled in heaven long before it became headlines on Earth. Every revival, every reformation, every moment when God decided to move had 3 things: divine preparation, patient waiting, then sudden fulfillment that left the world speechless. But here's what's going to shake you to your core. Here's what's going to make your hands tremble and your spirit leap. The 14th of August, 2025 carries that same prophetic frequency, the same divine appointment energy that marked those other dates in history. Why the 14th of August? Because in the Hebrew calendar, it falls during the season of Elul, the month of preparation before the High Holy Days. The month when the shofar sounds daily, calling God's people to awakening. The month when heaven's doors swing wider than any other time of year. But there's something else, something that's going to leave you breathless. In biblical numerology, August is the 8th month, the number of new beginnings, new creation, resurrection power. And 14, that's double 7. Double completion, double perfection. The number that says what seemed impossible is about to become inevitable. You've been in preparation for 70 years, 80 years, 90 years. You've been waiting through seasons that felt endless, through prayers that seemed to bounce off heaven's ceiling. But what if I told you that every single day of waiting was building toward the 14th of August, 2025? What if I told you that your name, yes, your name, has been written in heaven's script for this exact moment? That every tear, every struggle, every moment you felt forgotten was actually God preparing you for a breakthrough so massive it would require decades of character development to handle it? The 14th of August, 2025 is such a day, and your name is in the script. But here's the question that will determine whether you receive what's coming or watch it pass by. Are you ready to stop living like a survivor and start walking like the victor God always said you were? Listen to me, chosen one. What I'm about to tell you will either ignite the fire that's been smoldering in your chest for decades, or it will expose the cold ashes of a calling you've let die. This is not a prophecy for spectators. This is not spiritual entertainment for Sunday morning comfort. This is a divine assignment for participants. And if you think you can sit back and watch this unfold like some celestial movie, you've misunderstood everything about why you're still breathing at 70, 80, 90 years old. You want to know why you survived that heart attack when doctors said you wouldn't? You want to know why you outlived your spouse, your friends, your entire generation? You want to know why you're still here when everyone else has gone home to glory? Because God has been keeping you alive for the 14th of August, 2025. You are the remnant. You are the final harvest. You are the secret weapon He's been hiding in plain sight. But here's what's going to shock you to your core. Your assignment isn't retirement. Your assignment isn't sitting in that recliner waiting for Jesus to call you home. Your assignment is the most critical mission heaven has ever entrusted to human flesh. And it requires everything you've learned in your 7, 8, 9 decades of walking with the Almighty. The prophet Joel declared it plainly, "Your old men will dream dreams." Joel 2:28. Not might dream, not could dream, will dream, present tense, active, alive. Because the greatest moves of God have always required the seasoned vessels who've been refined by fire, tested by time, and proven faithful through every storm. You think Moses was finished at 80? He was just getting started. You think Caleb was over the hill at 85? He said, "Give me this mountain." You think Anna the prophetess was irrelevant at 84? She was the first to proclaim the Messiah to all Jerusalem. But here's where most of you will fail this assignment. You'll make it about yourselves. You'll think this prophecy is coming to give you a comfortable retirement, a peaceful ending, a gentle slide into glory. Wrong. Dead wrong. This assignment is about the generation you're leaving behind. This is about your grandchildren who don't know God. This is about a nation that's forgotten its foundations. This is about being the bridge between heaven and earth in the final hour. God is calling you to 3 sacred actions, and your obedience to these will determine whether the 14th of August, 2025 finds you ready or wanting. First, clean the altar of your heart. I'm talking about that bitterness you've been nursing for 30 years, that unforgiveness toward your children who abandoned you, that resentment toward the church that hurt you, that anger at God for taking your spouse too soon. You think you can carry that poison into your assignment. You think heaven will release supernatural power through a bitter vessel. Listen to me carefully. Every tear you've cried, every betrayal you've endured, every disappointment that cut deep, it wasn't meant to harden your heart. It was meant to hollow it out so God could fill it with His glory. But if you filled those hollow places with bitterness instead of His presence, you're disqualified before you even begin. Second, watch for divine appointments. Stop living like every day is ordinary. Stop treating every conversation like small talk. Stop believing that every person who crosses your path is coincidence. God is positioning people around you who need exactly what your decades of faithfulness have produced. That grocery store clerk who looks exhausted, that neighbor who just lost their spouse, that grandchild who's struggling with depression. They're not interruptions to your peaceful retirement. They're assignments from the throne room. Your presence carries weight now. Your words carry authority. Your prayers carry power that younger generations simply don't possess. Because you've walked through valleys they've never seen. You've climbed mountains they can't imagine. You've endured storms that would destroy their faith. Third, speak life into the next generation. This is where your assignment becomes urgent, deadly urgent. Because there's a generation rising up that's never heard the testimonies of God's faithfulness. They've never seen someone trust God through the Great Depression. They've never witnessed faith that doesn't crumble when the doctor gives a bad report. They've never observed hope that survives the death of dreams. But you have. You carry stories of miracles they need to hear. You possess wisdom they're dying for. You hold keys to survival they desperately need. And if you take those stories to the grave without passing them down, their blood will be on your hands. The writer of Hebrews said it perfectly. By faith Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. Hebrews 11:4. Your assignment is to speak now while you're alive, so your voice echoes long after you're gone. But here's the question that will determine everything. Are you ready to stop being a blessed recipient and start being a dangerous distributor of God's power? Are you ready to stop asking what God can do for you and start asking what God can do through you? Because the 14th of August, 2025 isn't coming to retire you. It's coming to deploy you for the greatest assignment of your entire life. And if you think you're too old, too tired, too forgotten to be used by God in mighty ways, you've bought the enemy's biggest lie. If you accept this assignment, if you're ready to clean your heart, watch for appointments, and speak life into the next generation, say it out loud right now. I receive it. But know this. Once you say those words, there's no going back to ordinary, because extraordinary is exactly what this dying world is desperate to see. The question burning in heaven right now is this: will you be the generation that hands down victory, or the generation that hands down defeat? Beloved, what I'm about to reveal will stop your heart and restart it with heaven's rhythm. Because on the 14th of August, 2025, God isn't just going to speak, He's going to demonstrate His faithfulness in a way so undeniable that even your doubts will bow their heads in worship. The sign you've been waiting for won't come like thunder from the sky. It won't arrive with angelic choirs or mystical visions that make your neighbors think you've lost your mind. No, dear one, The sign will come wrapped in the most ordinary moment of your life, and that's exactly how you'll know it's from God. Listen carefully. In 1 Kings chapter 19, when Elijah was hiding in that cave, broken and defeated, wondering if God had forgotten him, the Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then came a powerful wind that tore the mountains apart. But the Lord was not in the wind. An earthquake shook the ground, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Fire blazed across the sky, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper, and there was the Lord. Your sign on the 14th of August will be that gentle whisper, disguised as the most natural thing in the world. It might be a phone call you weren't expecting. It might be a letter in your mailbox. It might be a conversation with a neighbor you've barely spoken to in years. It might be something as simple as finding an old photograph that makes your heart skip a beat. But here's how you'll know it's your sign, chosen one. It will speak directly to a prayer you've been holding in your heart for decades. That prayer you've whispered in the dark when no one was listening. That desperate cry you've lifted to heaven when your strength was gone. That plea you've repeated so many times, you wondered if God was tired of hearing it. You'll know, because the moment it happens, something inside your chest will recognize it before your mind can even process it. Your spirit will leap, your eyes will fill with tears you can't explain, and somewhere deep in your soul you'll hear heaven whisper, "I heard every word, I saw every tear, and I never forgot." For some of you, the sign will come through reconciliation. That child who stopped calling 3 years ago will reach out. That friendship that ended in bitterness will find a bridge. That relationship you thought was dead and buried will breathe again. And you'll know it's supernatural because the healing won't come from human effort. It will come from divine intervention breaking through decades of pain. For others, the sign will manifest through provision. That financial burden you've carried like a mountain on your shoulders will suddenly shift. Not through lottery tickets or get-rich-quick schemes, but through doors opening that you never even knocked on. Opportunities appearing that you never applied for. Resources flowing from directions you never imagined. And you'll know it's God because the timing will be so perfect, so precisely orchestrated, that human planning could never have arranged it. But for many of you, and listen to this with your whole heart, the sign will come through what I call divine vindication. That situation where you were wronged, where your character was questioned, where people doubted your heart, where you were overlooked or undervalued. Suddenly, truth will come to light. Justice will prevail. Your name will be cleared. Your worth will be recognized. And those who whispered behind your back will stand amazed at how God defends his own. The prophet Isaiah declared in chapter 54, verse 17, "No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you." That's not just a promise, beloved. That's a guarantee with your name on it. But here's what will shake you to your core about the 14th of August. The sign won't just be about answering your prayer, it will be about revealing God's character to you in a way you've never experienced before. You'll finally understand that every delay wasn't denial. Every closed door wasn't rejection. Every season of silence wasn't abandonment. It was all strategic positioning for this moment when God would show up so powerfully, so precisely, so personally, that you'll never doubt his love for you again. Some of you are thinking, but what if I miss it? What if the sign comes and I don't recognize it? Listen to me, dear one. You cannot miss what God has specifically designed for you. In John chapter 10, verse 27, Jesus said, "My sheep listen to my voice, I know them, and they follow me." Your spiritual DNA is programmed to recognize your Father's voice. Your heart is calibrated to heaven's frequency. When your moment comes, every fiber of your being will vibrate with divine recognition. But here's the urgency that should grip your soul right now. The 14th of August isn't just about receiving your sign, it's about what you do with it when it comes. Because this isn't just a blessing, beloved. This is a commissioning. God isn't just answering your prayer to make you comfortable. He's activating your calling to make you dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. The very breakthrough you've been begging for is about to become the platform from which you'll help others break through. The healing you've been seeking is about to become the ministry through which you'll heal others. The provision you've been praying for is about to become the resources you'll use to advance God's kingdom. And here's the question that will determine everything about your future. When heaven opens its hand and pours out the fulfillment you've been waiting for, will you be ready to receive it not just as a blessing, but as a responsibility? Because what's coming on the 14th of August isn't just the end of your waiting season, it's the beginning of your assignment season. And the world is about to discover what happens when God's chosen ones finally step into their divine purpose. You woke up on the 15th of August, didn't you? And for a moment, just a moment, everything felt normal. The coffee still tasted the same. The morning news still droned on about the same earthly chaos. Your neighbor still walked their dog at exactly 7:15 a.m. like clockwork. But then you felt it. Something in the air was different, heavier, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. The light streaming through your window hit your skin in a way it never had before, warmer, more alive, almost electric. And in that moment, you knew. You absolutely knew that the 14th of August had changed everything, even if you couldn't see it yet. Listen to me carefully, chosen one. This is the most dangerous 24 hours of your entire spiritual journey, not because God's power has diminished, but because the enemy knows his time is shorter than ever before. You see, most people think prophecy fulfillment looks like Hollywood special effects, thunder and lightning, dramatic music, angels descending with trumpets blazing, but that's not how heaven operates in the final days. God's most powerful moves happen in the whisper, not the wind, in the stillness, not the storm. The morning after your Red Sea parts, you still have to walk through it. Think about Joshua standing on the banks of the Jordan River in Joshua chapter 3. For 40 years, the Israelites had wandered in circles, waiting for their moment. And when God finally stopped the waters, when their feet touched dry ground, do you think they felt like conquering heroes? Number. They felt the weight of what came next. Because crossing the Jordan wasn't the victory, it was the beginning of the real battle. And the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. Joshua 3:17. Notice that phrase, stood firm. Even the priests had to plant their feet and hold their ground while the miracle was happening around them. That's you right now. You're standing in the middle of your miracle, and it feels ordinary, almost anticlimactic. And the enemy is whispering in your ear, see? Nothing really changed. You imagined it all. You're still the same person with the same problems. But here's what hell doesn't want you to understand. The 14th of August was the trumpet blast. Now comes the march around your walls. For 6 days, the Israelites walked around Jericho in complete silence. 6 days of what looked like meaningless circles. 6 days of feeling foolish. 6 days of people watching them and shaking their heads, thinking they'd lost their minds. But on the 7th day, Joshua 6:20 tells us the people shouted when the priests blew with the trumpets. And it came to pass, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a great shout, that the wall fell down flat. The walls didn't fall during the supernatural moment at the Jordan. They fell during the ordinary obedience that followed. Right now, you're in your 6 days of marching, and it feels like nothing is happening. Your bank account looks the same. Your relationships haven't shifted. Your health hasn't dramatically improved. The promises God whispered to your heart on the 14th of August seem like they're gathering dust. But that's because you're judging spiritual reality by physical evidence. And spiritual reality operates on a completely different timeline than your impatience. Here's what's actually happening in the invisible realm while you're feeling disappointed. Every prayer you've prayed for decades is being processed in heaven's courts. Every tear you've cried in secret is being transformed into liquid breakthrough. Every closed door, Every rejection, every moment you felt forgotten, it's all being rewoven into a tapestry of purpose, so magnificent that when it's revealed, the world won't recognize you. But you have to keep marching. You have to keep believing when believing hurts. You have to keep obeying when obedience looks like insanity. Because here's the truth that's going to shake you to your core. The very ordinariness of this moment is the proof that something supernatural is brewing. God's greatest moves always begin in silence. His most powerful interventions start in the mundane. His most life-altering miracles are disguised as boring obedience. Moses didn't know that lifting a simple wooden staff would part the Red Sea. David didn't know that 5 smooth stones would topple a giant. The widow didn't know that pouring her last drop of oil would create an endless supply. And you don't know that your simple act of faith today, your choice to keep believing when everything looks unchanged, is about to trigger the collapse of every wall that's held you captive for years. The air is heavier because heaven is pregnant with your breakthrough. The light hits different because divine favor is repositioning itself over your life. The stillness you feel isn't absence, it's anticipation. But here's the urgent truth that should terrify and thrill you at the same time. This window won't stay open forever. God opened a door on the 14th of August, but doors can close if they're not walked through. Opportunities can expire if they're not seized. Prophecies can be forfeited if they're not partnered with action. You're living in the narrow space between promise and fulfillment, between the word God spoke and the reality He's creating. And what you do in the next 7 days will determine whether you step into your destiny or watch it slip through your fingers like sand. Stay with me. Before this is over, I'll give you the 3 prophetic actions you must take in the next 7 days to secure what God opened. Because the march around your Jericho has begun, and your shout of victory is closer than you think. But first, you need to understand something that will change how you see every ordinary moment from now on. Your breakthrough isn't coming despite the silence, it's coming because of it. Dear chosen one, I need to ask you something that's going to cut straight to the bone of your soul. When was the last time you told someone about the war you've been fighting in secret? When did you last describe the weight you carry at 3 a.m. when the house is quiet and your heart is screaming? You haven't, have you? Because how do you explain to your children that their parent, someone who raised them, provided for them, sacrificed everything, feels like a complete failure? How do you tell your spouse of 40 years that you wake up every morning wondering if God has forgotten your address? How do you admit to your prayer group that after 5 decades of faithful service, you still feel invisible to heaven? The truth is, you've been walking through a valley where the ground remembers your tears. Every step you've taken has been soaked with prayers that seem to bounce off the ceiling. Every mile you've traveled has been marked by betrayals from people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. The very earth beneath your feet knows your name because you've watered it with decades of disappointment. But here's what the enemy doesn't want you to understand about your silent battle. That crushing loneliness you feel isn't evidence of God's absence, it's proof of your calling. Think about Elijah on Mount Carmel. This man called down fire from heaven. He defeated 450 prophets of Baal in one afternoon. The entire nation of Israel watched God answer his prayer with supernatural power. But what happened the very next day? 1 Kings 19:4 tells us that Elijah went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die and said, "It is enough. Now, Lord, take my life." From supernatural victory to suicidal despair in 24 hours. Does that sound familiar? You've had your Mount Carmel moments, haven't you? Times when God showed up so powerfully that everyone around you was amazed. Times when your prayers moved mountains. Times when you felt His presence so strongly you could barely breathe. But then came the silence. Then came the wilderness. Then came that broom tree where you sat alone, wondering if you imagined it all. Listen to me carefully. The greatest spiritual battles don't happen on mountaintops. They happen in the valley afterward. They happen when the crowds go home and you're left with your doubts. They happen when the miracle ends, and Monday morning comes with the same problems, the same pain, the same emptiness that made you cry out to God in the first place. You've been in that wilderness for so long that you've started believing the lie that this is where you belong. You've made peace with disappointment. You've decorated your desert. You've learned to survive on crumbs when God intended you for feasts. But what if I told you that every unanswered prayer has been building compound interest in heaven's bank? What if every tear you've cried in secret has been collected in golden bowls before the throne of the Almighty? What if every night you felt forgotten was actually a night when angels were positioning themselves around your future breakthrough? The enemy has been whispering the same lie to you for decades. If God really loved you, this wouldn't be so hard. But that's not how spiritual warfare works. The devil doesn't waste ammunition on empty vessels. He doesn't deploy his best demons against people who pose no threat to his kingdom. The very fact that your life has been harder than most is evidence that you're carrying something precious. You've been attacked because you're dangerous. You've been isolated because you're influential. You've been forgotten by man because you're remembered by God. But here's where it gets personal. Here's where this message stops being theoretical and starts tearing at the wounds you've been hiding. How many times have you watched other people you know aren't as faithful, aren't as committed, aren't as desperate for God, walk into blessings you've been begging for? How many times have you sat in church and listened to testimonies of breakthrough while your own miracles stayed locked in heaven? You've probably even questioned whether you're doing something wrong. Whether there's some secret sin, some hidden rebellion, some spiritual failure that's keeping God at arm's length. You've examined your heart until it bled. You've confessed sins you didn't even commit. You've fasted until you were weak and prayed until your voice was hoarse. And still, silence. But what if the silence isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? What if God has been holding back your breakthrough, not because you're unworthy, but because the blessing He's prepared is so massive that you needed decades of character development to handle it? Your silent battle has been forging something in you that comfortable Christians will never possess. While they were building platforms, you were building perseverance. While they were collecting followers, you were developing faith. While they were speaking to crowds, you were learning to hear God's voice in the desert. Every betrayal taught you discernment. Every disappointment built your endurance. Every season of waiting developed your trust. You've been in God's postgraduate program while others were still in Sunday school. The question that will determine everything about your future is this: will you keep believing that your wilderness disqualifies you, or will you finally understand that it has been qualifying you for something extraordinary? Because the 14th of August, 2025 isn't just another date. It's the day your silent battle finally makes sense. But here's what's going to shake you to your very foundation, chosen one. The 14th of August, 2025 wasn't just a random date whispered by heaven. It was the beginning of a 7-day pattern that's been woven into the fabric of eternity since the dawn of creation itself. You see, God doesn't operate in accidents. He operates in patterns, sacred patterns that reveal His heart, His timing, His very nature. And the number 7? 7 isn't just a number, beloved. 7 is God's signature on everything He does. Think about this. In Genesis, God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, but He didn't stop there. On the 7th day, He rested. Not because He was tired. The Almighty doesn't get tired. He rested because 7 represents completion, perfection, divine fulfillment. But here's where it gets personal for you, dear soul. These next 7 days in your life, starting from the 14th of August, will echo through the next 7 years of your existence. What you choose to do, what you choose to believe, what you choose to surrender in these 7 days will determine whether the next 7 years of your life are marked by breakthrough or breakdown, by abundance or lack, by divine elevation or spiritual stagnation. Are you beginning to understand the weight of this moment? Let me take you deeper into this mystery. When Joshua stood before the walls of Jericho, those massive, impenetrable walls that had mocked God's people for generations, what did the Almighty tell him to do? March around the city for 7 days. 7 days of walking in circles while their enemies laughed from the walls above. 7 days of looking foolish to the natural eye while following heaven's impossible instructions. Can you imagine what those Israelites felt on day 3, day 5? When their feet were bleeding, their faith was wavering, and nothing, absolutely nothing had changed about those walls. I bet some of them whispered, "Maybe we heard God wrong. Maybe this isn't working. Maybe we're just walking in circles for nothing." But on the 7th day, something supernatural happened. The walls didn't just crack. They didn't just weaken. They collapsed completely. In one moment, what had stood for generations was reduced to rubble. Why? Because they honored the pattern of 7. Now let me ask you something that's going to cut deep into your soul. How many times have you been walking around your own Jericho? That financial struggle that's been mocking you for decades. That broken relationship that seems beyond repair. That health issue that doctors can't explain. That dream that's been deferred so long you've stopped believing it could ever come to pass. You've been marching around your walls for years, haven't you? And some days you wonder if you're just walking in circles. Some days the enemy whispers from the walls of your circumstances, "You're wasting your time. Nothing's going to change. You might as well give up." But what if I told you that your 7 days just began on the 14th of August? What if every step you've taken around your impossible situation has been preparing you for this moment when the walls finally fall? Look at Joseph. 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. But here's what most people miss. Joseph wasn't surprised by either season. God had shown him the pattern. He was prepared for the abundance and ready for the test. The 7 years of plenty weren't just good times, they were preparation for the 7 years that would save nations. Which 7-year cycle are you entering, chosen one? Are you walking into your 7 years of plenty after decades of spiritual famine? Or are you being prepared through testing for the 7 years when God will use you to save others who are starving for hope? These next 7 days will tell the story. 7 days to hold your ground when everything in you wants to quit. 7 days to stand in faith when your circumstances scream surrender. 7 days to speak life over dead situations when your voice feels powerless. But here's the prophetic word that's burning in my spirit right now. The enemy knows what these 7 days represent. That's why the attacks have intensified. That's why the doubt has gotten louder. That's why it feels like everything is falling apart, right when you thought breakthrough was coming. He's terrified of your 7th day, because on your 7th day, the walls don't just crack, they crumble. On your 7th day, the breakthrough doesn't just come, it explodes. On your 7th day, you don't just survive, you conquer, but you have to make it to day 7. And that means day 1 through day 6, you're going to have to walk by faith and not by sight. You're going to have to praise Him in the storm. You're going to have to declare victory while the walls are still standing. These 7 days aren't just time passing on your calendar. These are sacred days, appointed days, days that have been marked in heaven's ledger since before you took your first breath. Days when the very atmosphere around your life is charged with supernatural potential. Right now, I want you to do something that might seem simple but will change everything. Write 7 days somewhere you can see it every morning this week. On your bathroom mirror, on your coffee cup, on a piece of paper by your bed. Because every time you see those words, you're going to remember this isn't just another week. This is your Jericho week. This is your Joseph moment. This is your Genesis beginning. But here's the question that will determine whether you experience the miracle or miss it entirely. But here's what nobody tells you about divine doors, chosen one. The moment heaven opens a pathway for you, hell mobilizes every force it has to slam it shut. After the door opens on the 14th of August, old chains will try to follow you through it. You think I'm speaking in metaphors? I'm not. I'm talking about that toxic relationship that's been dead for 3 years suddenly calling you the night before your breakthrough. I'm talking about that addiction you thought you conquered, whispering in your ear when you're standing at the threshold of your destiny. I'm talking about that depression that held you captive for decades, suddenly showing up like an uninvited guest at your moment of deliverance. Listen to me carefully. The enemy doesn't fight fair. He doesn't wait for convenient moments. He strikes hardest when you're closest to your promise. Remember Pharaoh? When Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, what happened the moment they reached the Red Sea? Exodus 14:9 tells us exactly what the enemy does when you're about to cross over. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them, encamped at the sea. Pharaoh's chariots always chase after the Red Sea parts. Always. You thought those panic attacks were gone. You thought that voice telling you you're not worthy was silenced. You thought that person who crushed your dreams had finally moved on. Think again, because the closer you get to the 14th of August, the louder those old voices are going to scream. But here's what breaks my heart. Some of you are going to turn around. Some of you are going to hear those familiar chains rattling behind you and think, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this isn't my time. Maybe I should go back to what's comfortable. Let me ask you something that might cut deep. How many times have you been right at the edge of breakthrough and turned back because the shadows felt more familiar than the light? How many times have you stood at your Red Sea moment and chosen the security of slavery over the uncertainty of freedom? How many times have you let Pharaoh's chariots convince you that Egypt was safer than the Promised Land? The enemy knows your triggers. He's been studying you for decades. He knows exactly which button to push to make you doubt, which voice to use to make you question, which fear to resurrect to make you retreat. That ex-spouse who destroyed your self-worth. They're going to reach out with honeyed words right when God is trying to heal your heart. That family member who's never believed in you. They're going to plant seeds of doubt right when your faith is about to bloom. That financial fear that's controlled you for 30 years. It's going to roar like a lion right when heaven is about to open the windows. This isn't coincidence. This is warfare. But I need you to understand something that will change how you see every attack coming your way. 2 Chronicles 20:15 declares, "Do not be afraid or discouraged because of this vast army, for the battle is not yours, but God's." You're not fighting this battle with your willpower. You're not overcoming these shadows with positive thinking. You're not defeating these old patterns with self-help strategies. This is God's battle. And God doesn't lose. But here's the part that terrifies the enemy. You have authority over every shadow that tries to follow you through that door. Luke 10:19 reminds us, "I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions, and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you." Nothing will harm you. Not that voice that says you're too old. Not that fear that whispers you're not qualified. Not that person from your past who shows up trying to drag you back to who you used to be. But you have to recognize them for what they are. These aren't genuine opportunities. These aren't divine connections. These aren't answers to prayer. These are counterfeits, imitations. Pharaoh's chariots dressed up as rescue missions. That job offer that pulls you away from your calling. That's not provision. That's distraction. That relationship that feels familiar but doesn't honor your growth. That's not love. That's limitation. That opportunity that looks good but requires you to compromise your values. That's not blessing. That's bondage. The shadows always come disguised as solutions. They always arrive wearing masks of comfort. They always promise to make things easier. But chosen one, you weren't called to easy. You were called to extraordinary. You weren't chosen for comfort. You were chosen for conquest. You weren't selected for safety. You were selected for supernatural breakthrough. And that's why every shadow from your past is going to make one final desperate attempt to keep you from walking through that door on the 14th of August. Because they know something you're just beginning to understand. Once you cross that threshold, you can never go back to who you were. The old you dies at that doorway. The fearful you, the doubtful you, the limited you, the broken you. They all stay on the other side. And that's exactly what the enemy is trying to prevent. So when those old voices start screaming louder, when those familiar fears start rising higher, when those past patterns start pulling stronger, remember this moment. Remember these words. Remember that God didn't bring you this far to let you fall now. But in a moment, I'll tell you the exact sign to know when it's time to shut the door on those shadows forever. Because there comes a moment when you have to choose. Will you keep one foot in Egypt? Or will you step fully into your promised land? That choice is coming sooner than you think. You know what breaks my heart, chosen one? It's when I meet someone who's been carrying the same heavy stone in their chest for decades, the same unanswered prayer, the same ache that wakes them up at 3 a.m., the same weight that makes them wonder if God has forgotten their address. Maybe that's you right now. Maybe you've been sitting in that same chair, looking at that same wall, feeling that same emptiness for so long that you've convinced yourself it's just who you are now. The forgotten one, the overlooked one, the one whose breakthrough never comes. But what if I told you that the very room you're sitting in right now is about to become your burning bush? Listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will shatter every lie the enemy has whispered about your destiny. On the 14th of August, 2025, God isn't just going to visit your circumstances, He's going to inhabit your space. And when heaven moves into a room, everything changes forever. You see, for years you've been waiting for God to show up in some dramatic way. Lightning from the sky, angels appearing, a voice that shakes the foundations. But God doesn't always announce Himself with thunder. Sometimes He comes as a whisper. Sometimes He arrives as a shift so subtle that only your spirit recognizes it. Here's what's going to happen, and I need you to pay attention because this is your sign. You're going to be sitting exactly where you are right now, maybe in your living room, maybe in your kitchen, maybe on the edge of your bed, and suddenly something will feel different. Not the furniture, not the walls, not the air you're breathing, but something deeper, something eternal. That thought that's been torturing you for 20 years, it's going to feel lighter. That memory that cuts like a knife every time it surfaces, the sting is going to be gone. That fear that grips your chest when you think about tomorrow, it's going to release its hold. And in that moment, you're going to realize something that will bring tears to your eyes. You're not alone anymore. You were never alone. But now, you can finally feel it. This is exactly what happened when God's presence filled Solomon's temple. 2 Chronicles 7:1 tells us that fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. But here's the part that will give you chills. Verse 2 says the priests could not enter the house of the Lord because the glory of the Lord had filled the Lord's house. Do you understand what this means? When God's presence fills a space, it becomes so saturated with His glory that even the religious professionals can't function normally. They can't go through the motions anymore. They can't fake it. They can't pretend. The presence is too real, too overwhelming, too transformative. That's what's coming to your room, chosen one. Your personal temple, the place where you've cried, where you've prayed, where you've wrestled with God in the darkness. That ordinary space is about to become extraordinary because the same God who filled Solomon's temple is about to fill the 4 walls that contain your life. But here's what's going to shock you. You won't see it coming. There won't be a dramatic build-up, no orchestral music, no special effects. You'll just be there, doing what you always do, and suddenly you'll notice that the atmosphere has changed. The spiritual air pressure in your room will shift, and something that's been broken inside you for decades will finally, quietly, permanently snap back into place. Maybe it will be that grudge you've carried since 1987. Maybe it will be that fear that's controlled every decision you've made for the past 30 years. Maybe it will be that voice that's told you you're not worthy, not chosen, not special. Whatever it is, on the 14th of August, 2025, it's going to die in the presence of the living God. And here's how you'll know it's real. You won't have to convince yourself. You won't have to work up the faith. You won't have to manufacture the feeling. It will be as natural as breathing, as certain as sunrise, as undeniable as your own heartbeat. The priests couldn't stand to minister because the presence was too powerful. And when this sign comes to your room, you won't be able to stand in your old patterns anymore. You won't be able to rehearse your old complaints. You won't be able to entertain your old doubts. Because heaven didn't just visit you on the 14th of August, it moved in. But I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. What if this moment comes and you miss it because you're too busy looking for something bigger, something louder, something more dramatic? What if God shows up exactly as I've described, quietly, subtly, powerfully, and you dismiss it as your imagination? Because here's the tragic truth. Some people spend their entire lives praying for God to show up, and when He does, they're so busy looking for the earthquake that they miss the whisper. They're so focused on the spectacular that they overlook the sacred. Don't be that person, chosen one. Don't let the simplicity of this sign cause you to miss the magnitude of this moment. When that shift comes, when that heaviness lifts, when that peace descends, when that joy bubbles up from somewhere deeper than your circumstances, that's not your imagination. That's not wishful thinking. That's the fingerprint of the Almighty on your ordinary Tuesday afternoon. And once you feel it, once you recognize it, once you acknowledge it, everything changes. Because you can't unknow what you know, you can't unfeel what you've felt. You can't go back to believing you're forgotten when you've just experienced being remembered by the Creator of the universe. But the question that will determine everything is this: will you be watching for this sign, or will you let the 14th of August, 2025 pass by like just another day on the calendar? Beloved chosen one, as we come to the end of this sacred journey together, I need you to remember 3 eternal truths that will anchor your soul in the days ahead. First, the 14th of August, 2025 isn't just another date circled on your calendar. It's your divine appointment with destiny. The prophecy spoken over your life before you took your first breath is about to manifest in ways that will leave you breathless with wonder. Every tear you've cried, every prayer you've whispered, every moment you felt forgotten has been building toward this extraordinary moment when heaven moves into your ordinary space. Second, that sign in your room, that quiet shift, that lifting of burden, that supernatural peace that passes all understanding, it's not your imagination. It's the fingerprint of the Almighty confirming that your season of waiting is over and your season of supernatural acceleration has begun. When the spiritual atmosphere in your space changes, when that heaviness lifts, when memories stop hurting, that's God moving in permanently, not just visiting temporarily. Third, you are not walking this path alone. Even when the silence felt deafening, even when the breakthrough seemed impossible, even when you wondered if your prayers were bouncing off the ceiling, the Creator of the universe was orchestrating events, aligning circumstances, and preparing this moment of divine intervention specifically for you. But more than that, remember that you have a family right here. This community of believers who understand your struggles, who've walked similar paths, who are ready to stand with you in prayer and faith. We're not just viewers on a screen, we're fellow chosen ones, united by the same calling, connected by the same hope, bound together by the same God who never forgets His promises. Let me ask you this final question, and let it settle deep in your spirit. If God has preserved you through every storm to bring you to this prophetic moment, if He's been preparing this divine appointment since before time began, if He's about to move into your room and transform everything, what will you do with this revelation? Will you receive it with the faith of a child, or will you let doubt rob you of your miracle? Before you answer that question, I want to pray over you with the authority of someone who has walked with God for decades and witnessed His faithfulness in every season. A prayer of divine appointment. Heavenly Father, I place my hand on the shoulder of every precious soul watching this right now. Lord, you see them, not just their circumstances, but their hearts. You know the battles they've fought in secret, the tears they've cried when no one was watching, the faith they've maintained when everything looked impossible. Father, as the 14th of August, 2025 approaches, I pray that you would prepare their hearts to receive this divine visitation. Let them recognize your presence when it fills their room. Let them feel the shift when you move from visiting to inhabiting their space. Let them know, beyond any shadow of doubt, that they are loved, chosen, and never forgotten. God, bless their families, their health, their finances, their relationships. Open doors that no man can shut. Close doors that lead to harm. Give them wisdom for every decision, strength for every challenge, and faith for every impossibility. Lord, let this prophecy manifest in their lives exactly as you have ordained. Let the 14th of August, 2025 be remembered as the day everything changed, the day their breakthrough finally broke through, the day their promise finally came to pass, the day their faith became sight. Surround them with your protection, fill them with your peace, and remind them daily that they are walking in your perfect timing. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Now, chosen one, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell us how this message has impacted your heart. What are you believing God for as the 14th of August, 2025 approaches? Don't keep this revelation to yourself. Share your testimony, ask for prayer. Let this community surround you with love and intercession. And please, if this word has stirred your spirit, share this message with someone who needs to hear it. There's someone in your life right now who's been waiting for confirmation that their breakthrough is coming, that their prayers matter, that God hasn't forgotten them. Be the vessel He uses to deliver hope to their doorstep. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This journey of prophetic revelation is just beginning, and I don't want you to miss what God is about to pour out in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you for staying with me through this entire message. Thank you for opening your heart, for allowing these words to penetrate the sacred chambers of your soul, for believing that your best days aren't behind you, they're ahead of you. Until we meet again, walk in the confidence that you are chosen, you are loved, and your divine appointment is just around the corner. God bless you mightily, beloved. Your moment has come.